The thundering sounds of heavy artillery echoed in our neighborhood. Bullets ricocheted in our streets. The screams of women and children pierced through our ears, and it played like a soundtrack from a never-ending horror movie. Only this was real life, our lives. At a moment's notice, my parents gathered our most precious possessions into a single bag. They lifted us and our very few belongings into our family vehicle. My father was determined to carry us to safety. We urgently maneuvered through the hectic streets of Saigon that were bursting with masses of people. Shadowy clouds blanketed the sky with dark smoke from firearms and bombs that had descended nearby. The air was weighty, but it wasn't from the weapons of destruction. It was from human fear and despair. We all felt the terror circling all around us, and it manifested on our faces, all of our faces. Grandfathers, grandmothers, parents, and children were moving in tangled chaos. We ran. We all ran, hoping to end up anywhere but here. It was surreal. Finally, we arrived at the congested dock where very few ships remained, and we hastily ran and boarded a rickety old cargo ship that was not intended for human passengers. And as our ship leisurely drifted away from the land, we gazed in horror. At that moment, we became refugees. We didn't know if we would ever return to our homeland. We didn't know our fate or our destination. And we stayed and arrived at 2 different refugee camps where we lived. We were known as the boat people. And I'm a refugee from Vietnam. When refugees flee our homeland, we take with us our most valuable possessions, some of which are tangible, such as photographs, heirlooms, and jewelry. And then there are the more important items, the intangible items, that are more difficult to quantify. It's our culture, our heritage, and our language, which are not felt or heard or seen, and oftentimes not appreciated by those who've never lost them. When we initially arrived in the United States, nonprofit and faith-based organizations assisted us with our initial resettlement. In order for us to adjust to a new country with new customs and a new language. And I interpret their actions as well-intended and compassionate. But in looking back as an adult, I see how these well-meaning acts can erode over time and cause us to question ourselves and who we are. And you're thinking that these are only part of my childhood experiences or part of my growing pains. But I'm here to tell you that these situations continue to persist to this day. For example, I had a former colleague, coworker, who struggled with and notoriously mispronounced my name, to the point that they asked me to change my name to something easier for them to pronounce. Keep in mind, my name is just one syllable. In another instance, I had attended a wedding where both the bride and the groom were Vietnamese, as with most of the guests. And in the middle of the bride and the groom addressing their guests at the reception, a shout came from the back of the room, "Say it in English." This may have been done innocently, or perhaps it wasn't. Still, it has an unconscious impact for those of us who hear it. And I know my situation is not unique to my ethnicity, my country of origin, or when I arrived into the United States, because I know refugees and immigrants from all around the world who have shared very similar experiences. And in our initial introduction, they would tell me to call them by their nickname or their American abbreviated name. And I would immediately say, "No, I want to call you by your birth name. I want to honor who they are and where they came from." And I tell them they don't need to dilute themselves. Refugees like us have fled oppressive governments and situations who would have either suppressed us or eradicated us had we stayed in these situations. We would have experienced starvation, torture, been placed in re-education camps, or faced the real possibility of death from governments and situations who want to expunge us and who we are. So why would we allow for that to happen now? Assimilation is an apparatus that manifests itself through the dominant society, through gestures, actions, and words. Assisting newcomers with integrating into a new country is one thing. However, the persistent and continual messaging to abandon who we are by asking us to change our name or discouraging us from speaking our native tongue, well, that's no longer assisting when we're asked to do that just to make you more comfortable around us. And it happens on a broad scale, where school districts have banned the teaching of ethnic studies in their curriculum. And bias has been hardwired into our hiring system because we see partiality overshadowing the initial screening process of very qualified applicants. In a joint study by Stanford University and the Harvard Business School, the results demonstrated that applicants who included racial or ethnic identifiers in their applications and resume were less likely to receive a callback if they had an indicator of a foreign name or a name that was difficult to pronounce versus those with an anglicized name. Most recent, the US Department of Justice has eliminated diversity training for all immigration judges. And just 2 months ago, the US Agency for International Development, one of the largest international relief organizations in the world, has suspended diversity training, diversity and inclusion training for their employees. Specifically, training that included concepts such as systemic racism and unconscious bias by being taught in the workplace. These actions tell me that those intangible items that are so significant to us are irrelevant or unimportant. This is colonization. Colonization just isn't about dominating another country and exuding your authority over another. Colonization prevents someone like me from speaking my native tongue. It encourages us to change our names or abbreviate it to something completely different. It causes us to feel ashamed of who we are and where we originated from and our homeland. And it prevents us from showcasing our culture. But most important, colonization eradicates us for who we truly are as a whole. It corrodes the very root of our core being, and it distorts how we view ourselves and how we're viewed by others. So we need a paradigm shift on how we view assimilation. I have 5 suggestions. 1, reject the idea that the dominant culture is the only one and the right one. 2, combat discriminatory hiring practices. For organizations and individuals who value diversity, implement these beliefs into action by weighing every applicant equally based upon their merit. 3, be humble. Experience a new perspective. Experience a new culture. Go to places and events where you are part of the underrepresented group. 4, if you can't pronounce our name, ask. When we pronounce it for you, listen. Correctly pronouncing a person's name is a sign of respect. 5, appreciate the harmonious sound and the intellect that it requires for someone to be multilingual and speak another language. For refugees and immigrants, I have 2 suggestions. The first is celebrate your ethnicity, your culture, your language. And second, appreciation of your new home should not come at the cost of abandoning ourselves. Chúng ta có thể có tất cả. We can have it all. Let's reject assimilation. Let's embrace multiculturalism. And let's dismantle colonization. Thank you.